Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Paul, I'm with the Dicey Review, and today we're going to be learning how to play the 2 to 5 player game Ticket to Ride, released by Days of Wonder. Ticket to Ride comes with all of the components that you see here, including 110 train car cards in 9 different types, a summary card, a longest continuous path card, 30 destination tickets, a game board, and 240 colored train cars, as well as scoring markers in each of the 5 different player colors. To begin setup, first place the board in the center of the table. Then each player will take their 45 train markers and their scoring marker. Then each player places their scoring marker near the start space of the scoring track. Then after shuffling all of the train cards, deal each player a starting hand of 4 cards. The remaining train cards will be shuffled and placed face down near the board. The top 5 cards from this deck will be placed face up in a line nearby. Place the longest path card near the board. Then, after shuffling the ticket deck, each player will be dealt a hand of 3 tickets. With this starting hand of tickets, players have to keep at least 2 of them, but they can keep all 3 if they want. These cards are kept secret from the other players, and any card that the players choose to discard would be placed at the bottom of the ticket deck. And then this shuffled ticket deck is placed near the board as a supply for other players. You can also place the scoring summary card near the play area if that would be helpful, but there is also a scoring summary printed on the game board. The most experienced traveler would be the first player, or alternatively you could just decide this randomly. In Ticket to Ride, the goal is to be the player who scores the most points. Players will score points in one of 3 ways. They can either score points by completing routes. The length of the route will determine how many points a player will score. Players will also score additional points by completing tickets, and this is done by connecting routes all the way from one city to another in an uninterrupted line. And finally, the player who's constructed the longest uninterrupted track will score a bonus of 10 points at game's end. Beginning with the first player and then continuing in clockwise order, a player will take a turn. And on their turn, they can take one of 3 possible actions. The first action that a player can take is to draw train cards. This will be done very often in the game, as train cards are the main way that you can complete routes. A player is able to draw 2 train cards either from the face-up display or as a blind draw from the deck. It's important to note that players can see what new cards come out before they decide on their second card as well. So for instance, if the green player were going first, they could draw this card, see what the new card is, and then draw another card from the face-up display, or take a blind draw off the top of the deck. There's one special exception to this rule, and that involves locomotive cards, which are wild cards that can be considered as any color. If a player chooses to draw a wild locomotive card as their draw, that's the only card they can draw for the turn. So after they draw this card, their turn would be done after filling in the empty space. If, however, a player draws a wild locomotive card as a blind draw, they get to select another card, either from the face-up display or from the top of the deck. This means that a player could potentially draw 2 wild cards on their turn if they're very lucky, although this is unlikely. If 3 of the 5 total face-up cards are ever locomotives, then the display is immediately cleared by putting all of these cards in the discard pile, and then 5 cards are immediately turned over to replace them. It's also important to note that there's no limit to how many cards a player can have, and if the deck is ever exhausted, the discard pile will be reshuffled into a new draw deck. Also, in the very unlikely event that no cards are available because players are hoarding cards, then no new train cards can be taken until players claim a route, which is the next action we'll look at now. The next action that a player could take on their turn would be to claim a route. To claim a route, a player has to discard a number of cards equal to the length of a route. and the cards that are discarded have to match the route's color. It's important to note that there are also symbols on each color card if players struggle with color blindness. So in this example, if a player wanted to claim this route from Calgary to Winnipeg, they would need to discard 6 total cards, and the color of the card would either need to be white or a wild would work, like in this example. Once those cards are discarded, the players would then place their train cars on that route to show that they've claimed it. The player claiming a route would also immediately score points based on the length of the route. So for instance, if a player claimed a 3-train route, they would score 4 points. But in this example, since the length of the route was 6 cars, this player would immediately score 15 points. Players can show this by moving their score marker along the track. There are a few important things to note about claiming routes. Players can only claim one route per turn, so for instance, from one city to another. Also, there are many routes on the board that show gray train cars, and these can be claimed by discarding cards of any one color. So for instance, to claim this route, a player could discard 2 white cards or 2 orange cards, etc. Also, there are double tracks on the board. This allows players to have more chances to connect cities and not get blocked. So for instance, if the yellow player were to go here, a different player could come and claim this route by discarding 2 cards of the same color. There are some restrictions to this. It's important to note that only one player can claim a route on a double route. So for instance, the yellow player couldn't claim this second route. And in a 2 or 3 player game, only one of the 2 routes can be claimed on a double route. In 4 or 5 player games, however, both routes can be claimed by different players. And finally, it's important to mention that players don't have to connect their routes at all if they want to. So for instance, the yellow player, after claiming this route, could then claim this route even though they're not connected. The last action that a player could take on their turn is to draw new ticket cards. To complete this action, a player would draw the top 3 cards off of the ticket deck. When taking this action during the game, a player has to keep at least one of the 3 drawn tickets, but can keep up to all 3 if they want to. Any tickets that aren't kept will be placed on the bottom of the ticket deck, just like when being selected at the start of the game. Also, if there are ever less than 3 destination tickets left in the deck, the players will simply draw however many are there, and then keep at least one of them. Destination tickets show 2 connected cities on the game board. If players are able to claim routes and connect these cities with an uninterrupted line of train cars, then they'll score the indicated number of points at the end of the game for that ticket. If, however, players are not able to connect these 2 cities with train cards, then this point total will be subtracted from their score at the end of the game. So tickets can be very useful, but are also risky to keep if you don't think you can complete them. Play will continue until any one player has either 0, 1, or 2 train cars left in their supply. When this happens, each player, including the player who triggered the end of the game, will get one final turn, and then the game will be over and players will calculate their scores. Players would compare all of their ticket cards. For each one of these ticket cards, you would check to make sure that this player has an uninterrupted line of cars connecting these 2 cities. So we'll look at Los Angeles to New York for an example. As you can see, the green player was able to connect an uninterrupted line of train cars all the way from New York to Los Angeles. This means they would score 21 points for completing that ticket. You would check to make sure each ticket is completed in this way for each player. In this example, the green player has completed all of their tickets and would score an additional 56 points. They would add this to the point total that they've already been tracking throughout the game by claiming routes. The yellow player was able to complete all of their tickets with the exception of the Seattle to Los Angeles ticket. If a player is unable to complete a ticket, that score is subtracted from their end-game total instead of added to it. So in this example, this player would only score 17 points because this 9 is subtracted and cancels out this 9 essentially. And finally, the player who has the longest line of uninterrupted train cars would receive the longest route bonus and add 10 points to their score. In this example, that would be the green player, as they have a line of 36 continuous cars. The player who has the most points would be the winner, and if there are any players that are tied, the player who had the most completed destination tickets would win. And if there's still a tie, the player with the longest continuous path of cars would win among the tied players. Alright everybody, that was our video. Hopefully it was helpful and hopefully it was informative. If you have any questions about how to play the game, please comment below and I'll do my best to answer those questions for you if I can. Also, if you're enjoying the content that we put out, please make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon to be notified whenever we put out new videos. Alright everybody, thanks so much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you at the table.